Good evening, folks. Audio check, please. Thank you. Thanks, Colette. I just want to make my notes here. What's the date? 2 October. Let's wait a minute or so for people to sign in, please. Right. Okay, so good evening to started. Andile, Colette, Conrad, Jana, Jenna. There's people representing all three cohorts. So you guys have met each other earlier when we did a meeting like this. So I've got Pretoria people, Varsity College Pretoria. Good evening, Carla. I've got people from online, Varsity College Online, and I've got people from MSA. Andile is from MSA. Just remind me again, Andile, you guys submitting a bit later. All right, guys, it's treated like a bit different. When is your submission date again, Andile?
So it's on the 5th of November.
November
The 5th.
the 5th.
5th, yeah.
5th. Online Pretoria, you guys are sitting on 30 October, right? Right. Then I'm going to say this. I have said it before and I will say this again. Carla, thank you for that friendly greeting. The additional submission date that you see on your PAS is there because it's a phase-out module. It doesn't mean the qualification is disappearing. It means the qualification is going to be changed from next year. So the module as it is a phase-out module. That means the institution really wants you to pass this module because it's not on offer. Good evening, Kyle. It's not on offer next year because it's phased out, no longer exists. That's why there's an opportunity, a second opportunity on your PAS, if you will, that I presume is there for people that are, very important, deserving of a second chance to perhaps use that second opportunity to submit. Why? Because once it's over, the ship has sailed. And if you don't get the research module, that means you have to, I don't know what, it's not going to exist anymore. So this is the year that you have to do it. I'm saying that because I've had many students asking me, why is there a second submission date on PAS? What's the story there? And I'm telling you honestly what the story is. Don't bank on the second submission. I don't think the second submission will apply if you bugger up and now you say, listen, I'm gonna take my chances and I'm gonna put my hope on the second sub. So lekker, I'm gonna, it's there. It's a catching net. No, it's not. I think the second submission criteria will be strict. It might be someone that literally went through everything and now there was some sort of a hiccup, or they are just under the qualifying mark or something like that. It's not an ad hoc, listen, guys, let's sit back, we've got a second opportunity. It's not that. So I don't want people to fail this module, folks. You can fail it. I've seen it failed many times. Okay. Q&A is, I think, the main thing. Let me first preach a bit to you and tell you this. I want all of you to own your work. I want all of you to trust your instinct, to trust the skills. You guys were on a massive growth curve this year from the beginning, learning about research, learning about academic writing, learning how to formulate arguments, learning about referencing, learning how to put together submissions, learning how to roll in the academic world. Massive growth curve. So now all of this culminates in the submission of your research report. Massively big document, massive long rubric with lots of detail in it. Here's the thing, if you remain faithful to the process, you are the most suited person to write your report. Please accept that truth. None of us, no one, is more suitable to write up this report than you. You've spent weeks and months in the literature, in the theory, you've worked with data, you've immersed yourself in all of this. You know what the current literature has to say about your discipline. You are the person that can make sense of the data. So all the building blocks you need to make a success of this are there. How can you bugger this up? You can bugger this up if you try and gooi something together from previous work and not treat this as a distinct standalone submission. Very important. Your work is not going to be read by your supervisor. Your work is going to be read by someone who has never, ever laid eyes on your work. There's no goodwill. There's no, oh, this is my student, I'll overlook and I'll mark lenient vibe. There's no familiarity with your study. The marker, the examiner, are literally going to open your work for the very first time they've ever seen it. They don't know you. They don't know what you've done through the year. They don't know what problems and what good things you've gone through. They're sitting with a submission. If you want to see it in your mind's eye, it's like a book on a shelf, like a hardbound dissertation or a report or a thesis. We call yours a report that an examiner is going to pull from the shelf and start marking with a red pen with a massive rubric that pages and pages long. And now, what are you giving the examiner and what are you not giving them? What are you not telling us? What gaps are that you leaving out in your report that should be there? It's stuff you've done, it's stuff you've encountered, it's stuff that you've probably dealt with before. But guys, you have to bring it together now in this final report. If you want to lose marks, then do a half-hearted effort of just gooiing stuff together and seeing, well, there's a report. Lekker. I've just copied and plucked stuff together. So there's my final report. Shanana. It's not that. It's not going to work. If you want to lose marks, be sloppy on stuff like tenses, because now every year I see people that says in a final report, take note, the researcher will interview 12 people. The researcher will use convenience sampling to target the population. What? Future tense. That sounds like a copy and paste from a proposal. That's got sloppiness written all over it. If you want to lose marks, bugger up the IIE Harvard Anglia referencing style. Guys, if I see you using an et al. In a reference list, I want to put down my pen and stop marking right there, because you do not deserve the honor to be treated as an academic. If I see a submission without a cover page, and I'll send you the proper stuff that needs to be attached, let me make a note of that. All the documents and the cover pages and everything else. Send to my reps. If you want to lose marks, give me something that's sloppy in terms of your edited document, in terms of your preamble. If there's an abstract that counts however many marks, say for argument's sake, there's an abstract that counts 5 marks, but you don't put an abstract in. Yes, I see that. There's no abstract. Can I give you anything but around 0? No, that's what you're going to get. 0, there's no abstract in this work. If you want to lose marks, make ridiculous recommendations, conclusions, assumptions that are not credible, that are not rooted in your findings, that make big jumps, that is just completely showing us that you are manipulating stuff. We want to see, are you a real scientist? Can you plan? Can you record? Can you plan? Can you execute? Can you record? Can you plan a research project? We've been through that, and there was proposals, and there was ethical clearance, and there was permission and approval boards and ethical clearance letters. Yes, planning stage. Can you execute? That's what you did last with part, what was it? Part 3, formative 5. You went and executed. Now the final thing, the final combination where all these threads come together is, can you record it? In other words, can you handle the write-up of this project? I need to just take quick list. We should have 5 plus 5 plus 3 people in here. Sorry, I just want to write this down now that I have it. So I've got Colette, I've got Conrad, I've got Kyle. These are my Pretoria students. Then from online, I have, I see Jenna. Hi, Jen. I see Jana. Hello, Jana. I see Carla. Hello, Carla. I see Neil. Neil is the thorn among the roses in online. I don't see Gabri. And then from MSA, the 3 students I have is Andile. I see you, Andile. And I see Newlyn. Good evening, sir. Newlyn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, that's 9 of us, 9 of you, and there's 10 in the meeting. So that's the people present. Okay, folks, I have this discussion very often with people when we talk about this. So tonight is not the right time to scare you guys and tell you how hard it is and tell you how people can fail. Tonight is the right time to tell you, you've come all this way, you've done loads and loads of submissions with lots of feedback, with lots of input, with lots of tuition. I firmly believe that you all know what to do. I really do. There's none of you that comes to a meeting like this saying, well, I don't have a clue what to do. I don't understand this. I don't understand that. In any case, you know what the answer is. I'm going to give you. If you don't understand something, figure it out. Do the research. I've told you from the start, I saluted you right at the start, and I said, guys, I treat you as academic peers. I'm here to lightly guide you. I'm there to support you. There's a lot of that support that is needed when you're on this journey, because the journey is tough and it's lonely, and you need someone to stand behind you that say, I believe in you. You can do this. I will guide you lightly. I will soundboard stuff. I'm not going to do the work for you. I'm not your catching net. What if you submit rubbish and you fail? Will I lay awake at night? No, I won't. I've had a number of honor students that failed, and it didn't bother me. I will not sign off a master's thesis. I will not sign off a PhD thesis with my name on it. But with honors, I am not so much worried about that. So, If you want to submit a failing research report, I will allow you to do that. And I'm not going to lose sleep over it. Please take that in. So don't think I'm going to rush in like some sort of an emergency worker to try and save the crap that you make, if you make that, excuse the word, and write your paper over for you and redo the work for you. I am not. I'm not your proofreader. I'm not your safety net. I'm not the person doing the work for you. Let's get that straight. Own the project. It's your project. You know what to do. Make it work. Data collection, I think, went well. Generally, I was happy with it. All my students are doing qual, as it were, which means your findings are not based in truth. They are based in perceptions of people. Question: what do you think about McDonald's food? McDonald's is rubbish. It gives you cancer. No, McDonald's is fantastic. What do you think about the education in South Africa? Our education is fantastic. It's world class. Next person, our education is lacking in several areas. What do you think about the governance in Eskom, in a parastatal like Eskom? No, Eskom is fine. There's definitely hope. We must just, uh, you know, support Eskom monetarily and give them lifelines, and they will come right. Next person, what do you think about the governance problem in Eskom? No, Eskom is a bunch of crooks. They are systemically corrupt. We need to burn the place down and set up a new parastatal. We don't care whether those statements are true, guys. That's not the purpose of qual research. It's opinions. It's getting into the heads of what these people think. What's their reality? McDonald's give you cancer. Can we determine that? Yes, we can. Let's do a massive quantitative study with 40,000 people and a control group of 40,000 and feed them only McDonald's for 2 years. And then check in a laboratory if there are carcinogenic agents that's related directly to the McDonald's food. And if we have outcomes on that study, we can say we've done a test with 80,000 people. Yes, McDonald's gives you cancer. We've done the work with a massive sample size, with statistics, with mathematics. We can say that. We cannot make absolute firm statements on a whiff of what people tells us. What's your favorite cold drink? Gas cold drink. Oh, it's Coca-Cola. What's yours? Coca-Cola. What's yours? No, I like Fanta Grape. I have found in my study that the favorite soft drink in South Africa is Coca-Cola. Really? You spoke to two people. They say that. And one didn't even say it. Now you make such bold statements on what these people think. We can't do that. Why is qualitative research important? Because it allows us to get into people's minds. I want to open a restaurant, a drive-through that sells bokkom fish, dried fish on a string. I don't know if you guys have seen it. You get it at the West Coast. It's horrible. I want to open a restaurant that sells bokkoms. I speak to people and people tell me, what do you think about the bokkoms? And so, will you buy it? Yeah, we might, but maybe a good idea, maybe not. And I get some information on that. That's not a feasibility study. If I really want to open a bokkom restaurant, I'm going to do a proper quantitative study with a big sample to find out if there's a place in the market for me to open my bokkom drive-through franchise. And that's what a feasibility study will entail. Big sample so that I can generalize the findings to the population and say, well, I've determined that I can bet about 3% market share based on my study of the takeaway market share with my bokkom. So I'm going to take market share from the pizzas and the KFCs and the McDonald's and the Debonairs and all of those and the Chicken Lickens and the Simply Fish. I'm going to come in with my thing. That's a feasibility study. It's quantitative. I can bank on the outcomes. I can bank on the results because they are statistically valid. They are reliable findings. Asking people about stuff is always interesting, and that informs the topic. It gives us understanding. It explains the hows and the whys, which is important to understand. And very often we do qualitative work first when we want to understand a discipline. And in the qualitative work, we identify themes, we identify variables, we identify things that we need to investigate further. We identify the language that is important in this discipline that I am investigating. Who joined us now? It is Letabo. Letabo, good evening, good evening. And then we move on to do more quantitative work in a discipline to get an idea of more concrete findings, more reliable findings that can actually be regarded as truth. That's important. But what do people on the ground think, feel, believe, regard as their reality? Whether it's true or not, that's not the issue. It's still important and it's still worthwhile to hear what people say. You speak to a company and they tell you training is lacking. We want to do more training. Please, you cannot go back to the board in your report and say training is lacking. I've discovered that training is lacking. No. What you've discovered is that people think training is lacking. Can you hear the difference? What you've discovered is that employees are of the opinion that training is lacking. Do you tell the board, listen guys, you need to start training programs because training is a problem? No. You tell the board, listen guys, you can investigate the issue of, and please don't ever use the word issue in academic vocabulary. It's a gaga word. The issue of of training came up from amongst your employees. My report suggests that you investigate into this. All right, thank you, says the board. We take note of that. And they come back a bit later and they say, you know what? We had lots of training here. We sent every second person on training every second week. And we came back with an audit that showed us that they were not really value in the training. People went for the catering and some of them flew all over the world and all over the country and it went lekker. And people signed up for training programs left, right, and center. And when we did the audit to see what's the return on our investment in this training, we saw that it's not really worthwhile. So we canned it. So we stopped training people. Can you see why people say there's a training problem? But you interpret it as a fact. You told the board there's a training problem and they're going to fire you when you submit a report like that because you're talking nonsense. Had you said, listen, it might be beneficial for the board to investigate the issues around training, then you would have been in safe water. But now you said something as absolute facts, which is it's not, because there's a different explanation that explains why people are carrying on. They missed the catering and flying down to Cape Town and Table Mountain all the time, and now they are sour and they want training, and now they're somewhere saying, yeah, this place is crap and we need more training. I hope that helps you. We put forward our qualitative recommendations and conclusions in a way that's not so bold. We are confident in our findings, but we don't put it through as absolute truth because it's not. And the reason it's not, it doesn't have the sample size that underpins that, and it does not have the statistical and, listen, mathematical models to validate those facts as truth. So they're not facts, their perceptions, their opinions. If I walk down my street here where I stay, and I speak to residents and I ask them, guys, what's the problem? What problems can you report? And they say, well, there's a concern with security because our street lights are not always working, and the next person says it, and another one says it. Then it sort of comes to my attention. This looks like a theme. This looks like a majority or a prominent number of people are concerned about lights that are not always working street lights. So I can raise awareness. I can get some insight into what people think, and I can address, I can inform, I can go back to decision makers and say, this is what people on the ground have to say. So it's important to get qualitative data and to make meaning of that. But don't go and write textbooks. Don't go and base policy. You speak to 4 people about banking, and now you say my study is going to change the whole banking industry in South Africa. It is not. You get my, really guys, you have to get this qualitative data. It's not a limitation that you cannot generalize qualitative data. It's a limitation that I cannot drink my coffee from the pen. It's such a pity, man. When I bought it, I thought I could drink my coffee, but no, it doesn't work out. You will tell me, sir, you are talking nonsense. A pen is never, ever, ever, ever designed to drink a beverage from. For that, you use a cup or a whatever, or a glass. The pen was designed to write down words on a piece of paper, and it's perfect for that design. So don't say my pen is limited in its use because I can't drink my coffee from it. My coffee cup is limited. It's a limitation, man. Why? No, I've discovered now I can't make notes with my coffee cup on paper. Ach, are you crazy? It wasn't designed for that. A qual study is designed for a very specific purpose. That's to gain insight, to gain understanding, to get into heads, to hear what people say. What do you think? What do you feel? What do you believe? What's your reality? What's your opinion about this story? I want to know. Tell me. Qual study. Quant study, metrics, figures, tables. 20% of people believe this. Um, um, 80% of people do not agree with this. Pie charts, graphs, tables, numbers, metrics, quant. The numbers does the talking. Qual, the language, the words does the talking. The linguistic frames that these people give you does the talking. Now, if you're clever, which you are, your brain is going to make absolute sense of all the between the lines, nuances, subtleties of the database. I love my coffee. I enjoy a good brew. I am a caffeine addict. Listen what I said. I love my coffee. I enjoy a good brew. I am a caffeine addict. Did you guys hear what I said there? What was the theme? The theme was this person loves coffee. These 3 people love coffee. Did they use the same word to say that? No, 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 no. They used completely different language to say exactly the same thing. I love my coffee. I understand exactly what you mean. I enjoy a good brew. I understand exactly what you mean. I'm a caffeine addict. I understand exactly what you mean. You guys are all saying the same thing. You are coffee nuts, man. You are coffee people. You are coffee snobs. You love your coffee. Yes, that's what you said. Is that a theme? Yes, it's a theme. Why? Because it came up. It was said by a number of people. They like their coffee. Did they use the same words to say it? Not even close. Will a hard coding software program pick up on that theme? It won't. Remember, hard coding is something we do with massive databases. Call center database, 100,000 calls a day. I'm looking for swear words. I'm looking for people that use the F word. I'm looking for brand names. I'm looking for competition brand names. I'm looking for people that say words like good, bad, terrible, horrible. I want to throw the product away. And I'm harvesting those words with software to hear what people say. You guys can do a much more organic analysis of your data, which I hope you did, where you pick up on the nuances, the between the lines, the how people say the same thing that speaks to essentially the same theme using a different linguistic frame, using different words to say the same thing. I hope it helps you. I really do. If you want to lose a lot of marks, go and give me a question by question analysis of your data. If you want to lose a lot of marks. If you want to lose a lot of marks, go and give me a participant by participant analysis of your data. Participant 1 said this, participant 2 answered this, participant 3 answered this. Guys, if I can get a red pen and draw it right through your work and throw it in the dust, then I will. You look at the database as a whole and you identify the themes that jump out. They emerge. Have you seen what happens when you throw wood onto a swimming pool? The wood rises to the surface. It comes up. Or a ball, you can put it down underwater and it will come up. It will rise to the surface. That's what themes will do. And all of you will tell me, even in your interviews, your brain, magnificent organ, started to identify certain themes like that ball rising to the surface, certain themes came to the surface. Then you went and transcribed and you listened and you looked at your stuff and you see, all right, now these themes come up. You had to make sense of those themes, guys. And again, you are in the best position. Maybe you started with 8 and you cut them down to 6. Maybe you started with 3 and you said, well, there's actually 4. Maybe you said, well, I've got 5, but there's stuff I want to add, so I'm going to put sub-themes in there as well. Maybe you say, I don't have sub-themes, I just have 6 themes, finish and klar. How many themes? Not 1, not 2, not 20. 5, 6, 7, 8, a handful of themes. Do I have to have sub-themes? No. If sub-themes make sense to say there's a main theme and I'm elaborating with 1 or 2 sub-themes, yes. Does it make sense to you? Then it will make sense to me. There's no recipe. Let this thing birth itself. Men and ladies, you are carrying this baby in your womb, your academic womb. And you're going to give birth to this report now. It's almost going to birth itself. And you're going to be faithfully sort of facilitating this whole process. Writing too cryptic, if you want to throw away a lot of marks, leave out a detail and think the person reading it must imagine or guess, or the detail, they must just come up in their own minds with the detail that you are leaving out because you're not taking the trouble to tell us in detail what happened. Go in detail how you did your interviews, how you were cognizant of putting a trust environment in place, how you used the documentation, how you explained to them about the recording, how you had them sign consent forms, how you went through the interviews being cognizant of time and their confidentiality, how you went back and transcribed the interviews personally, how you then try and identify as you immersed yourself in the data, the themes that came out. Give me detail, draw me in alongside you of what happened with this study. I want to be there. I want to feel you drawing me in. You're not standing, you're not writing from a distance. You are there and you are telling me this. And you're drawing me in, and I feel, listen, I'm there alongside you. I'm part of this journey. I can understand. I can literally see how things went and how it went down and how you did and how you made sense of it. There are 3 distinct things that you must do with your findings. You must present the findings. I like it, please, when my students give me the findings in a summary, in a synoptic view. Make it a table if you want to make it a table. These are my themes. Bird's eye view, all in one place. So that all the themes, if there's 6 or 8 themes, is visible in one place, in one table or in one place. Don't rank them, don't weight them, don't give numbers, don't make fancy graphs and pictures and pie charts about themes. You don't want to quantify qualitative data. Please don't do it. After you've given me that snapshot of your findings, discuss the themes, discuss how the themes were presented, how were they rationalized, how did the themes, how did it go down in terms of what the themes presented, represented, how did these people make sense of the themes, and give us examples here and there. Don't overdo the personal examples. We don't want to have all your raw data. Colette, there was a question on, do you have to submit transcripts in your submission? Please don't. Have your transcripts ready. Put them on Drive. Have a link ready if someone asks for your transcripts and your recordings. By the way, you can point them there. Do not attach raw data to your submission. Please don't do that. My students, make it available with a link so that I can go to your recordings in a jiffy, so that I can go to your transcripts in a jiffy. If an external requests it, that they can go to that. If I mark someone's work as an external, and I see stuff that's looking funny or dodgy or manipulated or doesn't line up or something I smell a rat, I ask for the transcripts. I ask for the recordings to see if the student manipulated the study. And then, of course, there's massive consequences. That could be the end of your path and the end of your academic journey, for that matter, if you manipulate research data and research findings. But it does happen, and we are going to catch you out if you manipulate stuff from your data to your findings. All right. Tell us how these findings were played out in your work. Then contextualize the findings against your current literature. How does your findings and other contemporary literature compare? And close the loop where your findings now come into the picture with regard to your research question. Did you answer the research question? Why do you say so? Can you say you've answered it, and explain why you've answered it? All of you, please address data saturation. If you don't have it in there, you're going to lose a lot of marks. What is data saturation? That means you are not discovering new themes. It means you are seeing the same themes reoccurring as you go along. Normally from about 7, 8, 9 interviews in qual, we start to saturate. Doesn't necessarily mean that you did achieve it. You must tell us and convince us why you say that. Are you going to achieve data saturation in speaking with 3 people? No, you are not. Is it necessary to speak to 50 people to achieve data saturation? No, it's not. 7, 8, 9, 12 interviews will take you to data saturation if you do it well. And then you say, the researcher has most likely achieved data saturation. Give me a definition of data saturation with a reference and tell me why you say that. Why do you say you've uncovered all the themes that you believe there is? You don't think additional themes that were not discovered is out there. And in other words, adding on additional participants would have led to the discovery of additional themes. That's important. All your little thing is do some research on limitations, do some research on delimitations. Exactly what it means, and put something in there. All your documentation, your annexures, yes, you can change the labels, don't change the names. So if annexure A is your instrument, it is called an interview schedule, and you want to use sequential letters or numbers, make annexure B, C, D, and E. You can change that, but don't change the name. So if annexure H, for instance, for example, is personal consent form, but you want to make it the second sequential one and you want to call it annexure B, you can do that. If you want to keep it annexure H, you can do that. It's not a train smash. The question comes up every year. I don't care how you do it. Make sure all your annexures sits in your table of contents with the full titles. It's after your reference list. That's what it's called. A reference list. Not a bibliography, not references. A table of contents is called table of contents. It's not called contents. It's not called index. It's not called anything else. It's called table of contents. Detailed pages, headings, subheadings, numbers. References, pages, and pages, and pages of references. Yes. For honors, I'd say aim for 10 pages. Yes, not 2 pages, not 40. With a PhD, 80 pages of references. Yes, easy, 80 pages. 80 pages. That's a whole book, just full of references. Honors, NQF8, aim for 10 pages. That's a good benchmark to aim for. Are we going to look at every single reference? Yes, we are. We are looking at every bracket, every italic, every full stop. Is it alphabetical? Did you use block brackets for internet sources? Did you everything? Red pen, 5%, 10%, whatever. Don't do that. It must be faultless. Language editor, guys, the 30th is not for the language editing. There's a turnaround. You have to. I cannot coerce you. I cannot force you to do that. It's not a policy from the IIE. I can only recommend, beg, prevail upon you to get a language editor that will also furnish you with a language editing certificate. It's a person. A language editor is not a machine. It's not an AI. A language editor is not your buddy from school. A language editor is not your grandma or your golf buddy. A language editor is a language editor. That's people that do that for their job. That's what they do. They are language editors of academic works. That's how they pay the bill. That's how they earn the money that you pay them. It's advice. If you don't get a language editor, your work is going to be cluttered with errors. Take that to the bank with a police stamp on it. It's up to you. Your decision. I can only really strongly recommend that you get a language editor, but I cannot, please, and don't quote me as it is, I cannot force you to do that because there is cost involved. But if you can, please do it. Rubric, layout, headings, subheadings, not talking in a non-academic tone, integrating references as much you can. I want you to integrate references in your research methodology for every little thing you say. When you talk about sampling, talk about population, talk about data analysis, talk about data collection, all those things, references, and don't do deploy here all the time. I don't want to see deploy. Oh my goodness, you've only looked at one research methodology text, and that was deploy. No. Please use others as well to say the same thing. It's going to put a question mark if you only use and overuse one research methodology text. Lots of references in your methodological sections. Lots of references, loads of references in your literature review sections. Why? Because it's a review of literature. Seminal work, groundbreaking studies. How did the discipline develop? Which were interesting studies? Which were some of the findings that shaped the discipline? Avoid the shopping list style, please. and tell us a story. Bring that narrative through. It's difficult to write a good literature review. Guys, this thing is almost going to kill you. If you're not half dead by November the 30th or the 5th, October the 30th or the 5th of November, then there's something wrong. I'm telling you that now. If you don't have black blood clotting eyes around the 30th of October, you are doing something wrong. All of us went through that. If you don't have blood, sweat, tears, and all of that with your research, then you are doing something wrong. Okay? Then it's too easy. Then you are doing something wrong. I promise you. So you've signed up for this, so you might as well do it. And the reason you might as well do it is every year when I sit at the graduation in Hatfield Church for the Pretoria campus, online, I don't know where you guys and MSA, I see students walking across the stage getting their honors degrees. And they went through all this hell. They went through the pain, the blood, the sweat, the tears, the I'm hurtful, I don't understand, I want to cry, I want to kill my supervisor, I want to kill someone, I hate this, I love it, I hate myself, I want to commit suicide, academia is for sissies, academia is not for sissies. Go through all of that nonsense. That doesn't matter. It's normal. You want to finish this like many people have done. And those are the ones that walk across the stage with the dean or whoever, and they give you the honors degree that you have earned. We're not going to give it to you because we like you. I love you guys. I'm fond of you, every single one of you. You're going to work hard for this up to the place where it will almost break you. Is that completely normal? Yes. Don't think for some reason that the universe is going to catch this and it's going to work out fine. You're just going to close your eyes and hope for the best. My oldest daughter was like that when I taught her to drive in matric or standard, whatever, grade 11. I came to realize that she goes into intersections, but she doesn't really look left or right. It's like she sort of hopes for the best, and it worked out in her favor a lot of times. When I recognize this pattern, I say, you know what? You've booked a ticket. This is gonna lead to your demise. You're driving into this intersection, hoping for the best, and then it works out, and it sort of confirms your theory. And the next time you do it again, it's not gonna work. Guys, don't think you're gonna put together some substandard rubbish work and hope, well, it will work out by hook or by crook for some reason. It will not. You are responsible for every letter. If we print that thing out, and you must print one out for yourself and for your parents and maybe for me if you want to, you are responsible for every letter of every word until the very last full stop in that research report. A research report does not have chapters. Please, don't put chapters in. It's just sections. There's an introduction, there's a research method, there's a literature, whatever the layout is. They are sections and they just carry on. Justify your text, space your text. South African language and grammar on MS Word, nothing else. Not UK, not USA, South Africa. Stick to the guidelines they give you in terms of the font size, etc. When you work down with headings, don't go to massive headings and color and blue and big stuff. Keep it cold, clinical, boring, like I always told you. You want that professionalism to, to, to radiate from your submission. It must look like a professional report. That's going to a boardroom. It's going to an academic place. It's not there to look nice. It's not a book that must look flashy or hoo-ha. It must impress us with the color and the fonts, and it must look like a clinical report. That is what it is. Don't leave out stuff. Do not reveal the names and identities of any person, of any organization at all. In other words, do not attach any signed or filled in forms. Only use templates. Template, and you call it an annexure, and it's annexure whatever, and that's the consent form, and make reference to that and tell us how you used it. This form was signed by every participant before we commenced interviews, and I'm making reference to that. That's the template. If an examiner or a moderator asks for your original forms, then you can produce them. Gatekeeper's letter, put a template in. Tell me, all of you don't have gatekeeper's letter. There's a handful, 2 or 3 that has. That's the template. Make reference to it in your annexures. That's how you used it, and this is how it went down. If an examiner or a moderator says, I want to see your signed gatekeeper's letters, they can ask for it. But if you put it there, it's in the public domain, and we don't want that. It's confidential, guys. We don't want to have names of organizations and people in the public academic space. It's not allowed. Look at a couple of completed reports and get a feel for those. I know Bruce and I spoke about it. Maybe we must send you guys. I'm not sure. There's definitely reports in the library. Don't make too much of that. Get a feel for that. Should we remove any information that might identify participants from the transcripts? No, because the transcripts are never going to go into the public space. So it's not going to happen easily in any case. And yeah, don't worry too much about that. Those transcripts are never ever going to be published in the public domain, Conrad. So that's not a concern. Remember, you guarantee confidentiality for these people, and you must keep to that promise to guarantee confidentiality for them. Guys, the quality of this product is in a big way determined by your own personal skill, and it is difficult. Academic writing is not easy. It's not everyone's cup of tea. Many of you will say, listen, I want to get this report out of my life, and then I've had enough. I'm over research. Please do your best. Some of you will say, well, I like it. I'm considering doing something else like a master's or whatever. Doesn't matter. Just do the best you can. And folks, if you're honest, be brutally honest. You know when you click that button, whether this is your best work or whether it's a substandard work, hoping for the best, hoping, oh my goodness, I hope it works out. But you know in your heart of hearts that that's not the best work you could do. Do the research, understand, get an idea of what stuff means, make a plan to find out what it means if you need to find out what stuff means. There's no one gonna jump in here and rescue you. It's your thing, it's your project, it's your baby, guys. So I'm saying own it all the time. I'm saying it all the time. And put the best work out there. Don't manipulate your data. Don't manipulate your findings. Don't make assumptions. Don't say stuff that is ridiculous. Don't overdo it. Don't write me 3 pages of recommendations. Sometimes less is more. Don't overdo it. It's a small contribution that you're going to give us. Very small. It's a pixel in a big picture that your research looks at. Please, all of you, provide recommendations for future research. A lot of you will say, let's look at other stakeholders that also has interest in my topic. Let's look at quantitative studies. Let's look at these variables. Give us suggestions for other research. But your research is a minute little eeny-weeny, small part of the whole picture. That is fine. That is how research works. I told you guys that many times. Be faithful on your little small part of this whole research landscape, and other scholars will fill in the rest of the landscape. Every year, there's hundreds and thousands of studies being performed. And that's how the academic database is built. And all researchers and all academics have an academic gatekeeping responsibility to just do that small part, but do that in excellence. Tell me how to ride good. I can't, guys. Tell me how to ride a bicycle good, how to drive good. You know, there's people that can drive a car real well. They can go out to a track where it's wet and they can do interesting stuff with the car. You know, there's people that can drive a Formula One car at 300-400 k's an hour. You know, there's people that are on the roads with a license that can barely keep a car on the road. We have different skills. We've got people that have a natural gravity toward academic writing, and we've got people that don't have that. For some people, it comes more easy and natural than others. For some, it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to master. I can't give you 5 steps on how to do that. It's impossible. You have to now give us and bring to the table the skills that you have acquired over this year, the reading, the investment you've done in yourself. How many academic works did you guys read? I'm going to ask you that. People say, so I don't understand this or this. I say, all right. What must I do? No, you must explain it to me. Okay, I will explain it to you. First, do me a favor. Go and read 50 articles about this. What? Yes, 50. Come back with the list of 50 articles that you've read. Okay, sir. Come back. So I've read 50 articles on this. Do you now understand it? Yes, 100%. Why? Because I went and did the hard work of understanding. Guys, we're in a quick fix, quick recipe, magic wand culture in the world. With academic projects of this magnitude, it doesn't work like that. You're going to sit and bleed with this thing. Congratulations. I salute you. I've told you that many times, and I want to shake your hand at graduation next year and drink a beer with you. I will. But for now, let's get past the nonsense and the easy peasy and the shortcuts. There is no shortcuts. And don't sideline this. Don't tell me, sir, I've got a lot of social obligations, so I can't really give my work the attention it requires. You're going to get any sympathy from me or from anyone else in the academic fraternity. You think the IIE is going to be sympathetic and say, all right, let's make an exception for this student, man. They had social obligations and they couldn't cancel that. So the report isn't great, but we understand. There's zero sympathy for that. You've signed up for this. It is an all-consuming project. It consumes you. You're going to eat, sleep, talk, walk, shower, drink this project for the next few days. If you don't do that, I'm concerned. Then I'm saying, listen, what are you busy with? You signed up for the wrong thing if he doesn't do that. Please, guys, that's how it works. That's how it went for every one of us. Now we know that. If you don't understand something, figure it out. If you want an example of something, figure it out. I want to write a limitation section. What are you going to do? Go and read a couple of research limitations. What's a limitation? Short answer is easy. It's stuff that's out of your control. What's a delimitation? The short answer is easy. It's something that sort of depicts the boundaries of your study, the scope of your study. Go and look at examples of how people write it and learn from that, borrow from that. Go and see how other people put together a literature review, borrow from that. Go and see how people put together write-ups on data collection and data analysis in the qualitative world, and go and write up on that. I'm not sure about the thematic analysis. Okay, go and read 100 articles about the thematic analysis, and then you will be sure. Then you will understand. Figure it out. make it happen. That's all I'm saying. I am extremely proud of every one of you. And I hope that we're going to see a couple of distinctions from my group. I really, really think we've got distinction material here. There's no one here that keeps me awake at night for saying, for thinking that you cannot make it. Every single one of you, all of you, can nail this. If you don't nail it, that's because you've done something completely wrong. And then you've got yourself to blame. And you're going to kick yourself. There's an absolute blank canvas in front of you. And we've got time on our side, even though we are pressed for time, to make this work. So take it, do it, celebrate it when you are done, and enjoy the journey. Told you guys, next year you're going to miss it. You're going to miss the intellectual stimulation and. That's a lot. That's an overview. Look at the rubric. We understand rubrics at this time. You know, the rubrics is there. Look at the mark allocation. The mark allocation is sometimes, in my view, a bit skewed. But say everything you need to say. Give us as much detail as you can. What is a good research report? Here's my final words. And it's not good news. What is a good research report? A good research report is a report where there's so much detail that it's almost ridiculous, the level of detail you give me. A good research report is a report where there's so many references that it's almost ridiculous because you include and integrate so many references. That is a good academic paper, guys. That is what you are busy with. Relatively many references and lots of detail. If you write cryptic, you're going to lose marks. If your submission lacks integration of references, you're going to lose marks. And now you're going to tell me, but that is effort. It's time consuming, and working with references and adding them to the reference list and integrating them correctly. That is, I mean, I go and sit down, and when I look at my watch, it's 8 hours later and I feel I haven't done anything. That's the way it rolls. It's the way it is. Guys, it is a privilege to be alongside you in this journey. When we submit, it's going to take a long time to get the results back. It goes through a massive process of moderation and external and. So the marks is not going to be out quick. It is a bit of a waiting game to get the marks for that, but I want to see all of you submitting a passing research report. There's a lot that can go wrong. There's a heck of a lot that must go right. Read, research, take responsibility, put forward your best work you can do. That's me. My throat is getting dry. Who likes wine gums? We've got the WhatsApp groups. If you want to test something or bounce something, we keep those open. I'll send a recording of this to you as well. And I do sincerely believe you all know what to do, so do just that. If there's no other questions or uncertainties or observations or remarks, I'm happy to adjourn this meeting, folks. Get busy. And then we speak.
Thank you, Doc. Appreciate it.
Most welcome. Take care, folks.